Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we continue our study of the Book of Kings together. We are in the first Book of Kings, Melachim Aleph, Perek Gimel, that is chapter 3. We are up to verse 16. We just read of how Solomon asked God for wisdom. The wisdom, specifically the wisdom to rule justly and to be able to dispense justice in a wise and just manner. So we are about to read one of the most famous stories, which about Solomon's life and an illustration of his wisdom, specifically regarding an issue of him dispensing justice. And we read this following story starting from verse 16 in chapter 3. Az tavona shtayim nashim zonos el hamelach. Then, in other words, at some time after Shlomo had requested wisdom of God in the episode we just read about, two women that were prostitutes came to the king, vata'amodna lefanav, and they stood in front of him. Presumably, the reason why it's important that they were prostitutes, it could be from several angles, and they're probably all somewhat true. Number one, they were from the lower segments of society, and we see Solomon spending his time seeing and tending to the needs of everyone, even those that were in the lowest rungs on the social stratum. Another understanding also is because the particular episode that's about to take place, it would be very difficult to conceive if the women were more upper class and had a lot of attendants at the birth and so on. So the story is only more likely to happen because the women were prostitutes and presumably having their babies on their own in some hut someplace. So Vatomer ha'isha ha'achas, one of the women said, Bi Adoni, please my master. And this open door policy where people could just come into the king is something that we saw. We saw it earlier with David when Yoav told the woman from Tekoa to just walk into the king to seek an audience. We saw the way Avshalom stood outside and criticized his father for not having an open door policy. So we see that this was something that was common in those days. So one of the women come in and say, please my master, Ani v'ha'isha azos, I and this woman here. The way she refers to this other woman, this woman here, rather than by her name or some sort of a more honorable title, just shows how these two people had contempt for each other. Yoshvos b'bayis echad, we lived in one house. V'eleid ima b'bayis, and I gave birth together with her in the house. So, v'yehi bayom hashlishi lidiliditi, and it was 3 days after I gave birth to a baby. V'teled gam ha'isha azos, and she also gave birth. V'anachnu yachdav, we were together, it's just the two of us, helping each other, and that was it. Ein zori tono babayis, there was no one else with us in the house. Zulasi shtayim anachnu babayis, only the two of us were in this house. So there were no other witnesses to what happened. Vayamos ben ha'isha hazos laila, and this woman's son died in the middle of the night, asher shachva alav, because she was lying next to her child, and she presumably rolled over or suffocated the child tragically and lost her baby. In the middle of the night, she got up, and she took my son, who was lying at my side, and I, your servant, was asleep at the time. And she held him in her bosom, and she switched it out and put her dead son next to me. And I woke up in the morning to nurse my son. And my son was dead. But then in the morning when it was light, and I started, I was thinking and I was looking him over. This was not the son that I gave birth to. This is quite a serious accusation. And then the other woman said, Loki, b'ni hachai u'b'nei chames. It is my son that lived, and it is your son that died. V'zos omeres Loki, and the other one says, no, b'nei chames u'b'nei hachai. It is your son that died. It is my son that is alive. V'tidaberno lifnei hamelach. And they thus continued speaking about each other before the king. So we have this fight going on, each one claiming that their son was the live one and the other one was the one who had lost their child. Vayomer HaMelech, and the king said, Zos Omeres. This one says, Zeh b'ni achayo b'nei chames, that this is my son who is alive, and it is your son that died. V'zos Omeres Loki b'nei chames u'b'nei achai. So here you have an extremely difficult situation. And there's no witnesses, and there's no way to prove, and this is long before DNA testing, so there's no way to prove which one is the true mother of this live child who is before us. Vayomer HaMelech, and the king said. Here what you have is the king was listening. He was listening to the story, and he was baffled. So he says, Kechuli charev, get me a sword. Vayaviu hacherev lefnei HaMelech. And they brought a sword to the king. Vayomer HaMelech, and the king said, Gizru et hayeled hachai l'shnayim. Cut this living child into two pieces. Utunu et hachatzi la'achas, v'et hachatzi la'echas. Give half of it to one and half of it to the other. Vatomer ha'isha asher b'no hachai el HaMelech. And the woman whose child was the live one said to the king, Ki nichmru rachameh al b'no, because her compassion was overwhelmed. She was overwhelmed by her compassion over her son, about to see her son die. Vatomer, and she said, Bi Adoni, please my master, Tanula et hayelud achai, give her the live child, V'hamet al tamitu, but do not kill him. V'zot omeret gamli gamlach lo yeh gizoru. But the other one said, no, that it's neither, the child will be neither mine nor yours. Go ahead, gizoru, cut this child in two. So you had one woman begging, no, go ahead, give the child to her. And the verse identifies her as the mother. It says, Isha asher b'no achai, like the writer of the verse knows that she is the true mother. So, Vayan HaMelech, the king said, Vayomer, and he said, Tanula et hayeled achai, v'hamet lo tamitu, hi imo. Give the live child to her. Do not kill him. She is the mother, the one who was pleading for the life of the child, not to kill him. Now, one of the simple way of understanding this is that Solomon elicited this response in order to determine who the true mother was, right? And when he found the woman who begged for mercy on the child was clearly the mother, who would rather at least see her son live as the child of someone else, and the hope that maybe down the road maybe she can change things or whatever, rather than see him, God forbid, get killed. Another way of understanding this is that what Solomon wanted to discover was not so much that he cared who the genetic mother of this child was, but who does he want to give the baby to? Who would you want to give the baby to? Who cares who the mother is? If you're stuck with one woman who says, cut him in half, and another woman who says, please, please, please spare his life, which one would be the better mother for this child? Which one would be the right place for this child to go? And that answer should be obvious to anyone with a heart. So it doesn't really matter in the end who the real mother was, right? The real mother, the one who was an actual mother, the one who had the mercy and kindness and compassion that a mother needs to have to raise a child, was the one who pleaded with the king to save this child's life. And whether she was a genetic mother or not was really irrelevant. And that's the second way to understand this story. But regardless, we see how by listening to the women's pleas, by listening to them, Solomon was able to come to the best possible judgment. And all of the people of Israel heard the judgment that the king had judged. And they were in awe of the king. Sometimes yira is translated as fear, but a much better translation in most contexts is awe. Because they saw the wisdom of God was within him, lasos mishpat, to do justice. Anyone that heard the story would say that the outcome of this story was a just one, and that Solomon had gotten made a decision that resulted in the best possible justice for this child. This concludes chapter 3. Thank you so much for studying chapter 3 together with me. Looking forward to studying chapter 4 and, of course, the rest of the Book of Kings together. Have a wonderful day.